You're now listening to the Something Good Podcast Network. Please press any key to continue.
A kiss, as defined by Dan Webster, is something pleasing, a caress, a gentle touch. But there's another kiss that isn't in Webster's.
Hey world, we're kids!
Some critics say they don't make music, they just make noise.
Yeah, Kiss sucks!
Kiss implies the extreme in the theatrics on stage, utilizing fire and smoke and bizarre costumes, and the ever-consistent, constant concealment of their true identities.
Speaking of which, Kiss is going to have its own comic book soon.
Take Kiss with you. It's fun. Show your friends and be the first. Now.
Oh my God, no time to turn!
And welcome once again to No Time to Turn, a Kiss Nerd podcast.
Nerds.
As always, I'm with Cap and Alex. Cap and Alex. I can't even speak this afternoon as we record this.
Alec Baldwin.
Yeah. Put the gun away. Put the gun away. Alex.
Yes,
I'm sorry. They're from the Something Good For You podcast and network.
Yes.
We got to plug the network.
Yes.
Plug into the network if you haven't already and check out all the Something Good For You stuff.
All the nerdy stuff. We got nerdy stuff about Kiss. We got nerdy stuff about movies. It's what it is.
Yeah. Check that link in the description.
And we are, where are we at now? We just came out of the Crazy Nights cycle.
Yes.
Which we discussed was expected to be the big mega comeback album, Svengali led with Ron Nevison, who was the hot producer of the era. And it did not do at all what they were anticipating.
So what were they projecting versus what they actually got back?
They were projecting like a 12 million seller easy, and they got a million seller, which, I mean, a million seller for like most people, and especially now, people would probably be like, whipping their shit out in the pants, out of their pants and jerking in the fucking street and look at what I did. But back then it was kind of like ho-hum because, bands straight out of the chute with no reputation whatsoever could come out of nowhere with a marginal song at best. And I'm not going to name any names, Poison. And songs
that's going to make Jeff mad. He said he would rather listen to Poison before non-makeup Kiss any day.
Jeff
Williams from the band Stop Talking here in town.
Okay.
I know, we know a million Jeffs.
I mean, you know what? There are better Poison songs objectively than there are a lot of 80s Kiss songs.
That maybe. I'm not a Poison fan. I saw them one time open for David Lee Roth, and literally they just blew them off the stage. And they weren't all glammed out like their normal thing. Mm-hmm. But their songs sound like beer commercials to me.
That's why it went
they
over.
Write beer song commercials and then Kiss's rocking montage songs.
Yeah.
That's why they tour with like country acts all the time now and shit.
I guess. I don't know. Whatever. This isn't a Poison podcast. This is a Kiss nerd podcast.
Right. With the podcast drug in.
But what the point I was making was that Kiss was kind of an older band at this point anyway, right?
Right. But at this point, you would, I don't know if the term existed then, but, I guess the term today would be a legacy act.
Yeah.
And
I think just at this era, they would just be called old news.
Or dinosaur rock.
Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, even dinosaur rock yet.
The idea of them being a legacy act is going to play into what we're going to talk about today, which is the Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits compilation.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But before we get to that, we kind of hopscotched over something that was kind of a big deal, especially in its time, which was the Kiss Exposed home video. It was not their first long-form home video introduced into the market. The Animalized video was. But the Kiss Exposed video, and it had been delayed several times. So when this thing hit, it had already been hyped pretty heavily. I don't know if hyped is the right word. It was advertised.
Marketed.
It was already being marketed and advertised long before it came out because it kept getting delayed. I can remember full page ads in the back of like Circus magazine. And
Yeah, because it releases near the beginning or end of the Crazy Night cycle.
It was right there in the middle of it. I think it was 87.
But
so we're gonna have to rewind back to 87 here to talk about this.
Yeah, but the odd thing is this entire video is Asylum based.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
This was recorded in the Asylum era.
It doesn't have anything from Crazy Nights on it. Which that's one thing I meant to go back and look and see when this thing was released and why it would not have had at least, because it seemed like it came out during that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's not a whole lot of info on the recording and or release of this. I've just got a basic 87 on the release on the date, but no, it includes the Who Wants to Be Lonely music video along with All Night. But then they pull out the Rio de Janeiro 83 I Love It Loud.
Well, okay, now wait a minute, stop. You've got this seems just so casual ho-hum to you. Oh, okay. They got makeup clips.
Okay.
Y'all don't understand the gravity of this.
I feel like this one.
Out.
Well, this one was already out because it was part of the news footage. The Rio show was broadcast.
Yeah, but this wasn't. There wasn't a lot of tape. I mean, this was still during the advent of VHS.
Well, if we actually really want to do it, let's take a full step back and actually explain what the hell we're even talking about with Kiss Exposed. What is this?
That's what I'm saying. It's a long form home video. It was a compilation of videos that they had recorded along with live clips from the makeup era, interspersed with these comedic bits. How comedic they are,
I was gonna say,
depends on your
take on what comedic means.
So, were a lot of bands doing this? Because I know Motley Crue kind of had one too, where they're just like on the cars and in the studio and drinking and all that. I forget what theirs was called. Oh, it was called Uncensored. Yeah.
This
is Kiss Exposed.
So they're definitely taking a cue from Uncensored, I think.
Okay. I was wondering if more bands were doing that kind of thing too, like with videos and shit like that.
I wouldn't be surprised.
It's set up like there used to be a syndicated television show called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and it was hosted by this guy named Robin Leach.
Yeah.
And he went into these people, these celebrities' palatial estates.
For $900 million.
You can have one of, the fabulous life of whatever.
Yeah, he did a VH1 show, like, when I was, like, a teenager. That was weird. It was, like, the same thing, but, like, on VH1.
Well, here it's not Robin Leach. Here it is an actor named Mark. Help me out here.
I knew that was coming. I was like, shit, that was the one thing I didn't.
No, I got it right at the tip of my tongue. See, now there was an actress on this. He's from the television show Fridays, and I'm going to say Mark Kemp, but that's Brandis Kemp was, I think, the actress on that. It was Mark Blankfield.
Okay,
I don't know why that slipped my head there.
Is he doing a Robin Leach voice?
No, he's just doing kind of like this clueless reporter guy.
Yeah.
So it's not a direct rip of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, but it's still the kind of he goes to the quote unquote Kiss mansion, which of course was a rented mansion.
Yeah. Well,
it wasn't actually one of their houses.
I've heard conflicting. So in researching this, I've actually heard conflicting arguments. I've heard that it was a rented mansion. I heard that part was rented, but part was actually Paul's house. The backyard, like where the pool was, that was Paul's house. And then I've heard that a lot of the interior, not the exterior, but the interior was shot at Paul's place. So there's a clever edit.
I don't know.
There's a clever edit when they're walking down the hall and they're about to go into Gene's room. And the camera bumps into Paul, creating a all black screen. And when it pulls back out, they open up the door. And that opens up to a brand new area.
Well, that's possible, yeah. I know that they rented a place called the Greystone Manor, I think. Mm-hmm. And so at least the externals were done there. I'm not sure, though. I mean, it really doesn't matter. From what I understand, I think it was a fairly open secret that a lot of the stuff that was in the actual Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous show wasn't actually the celebrity homes.
No.
It was, it was sort of like pro wrestling for the high elite or something, you know.
But but the whole hook of the video is like, you know, the guy walks up and he's like, hey, you know, we're here for the thing. And he's like, I thought 12 midnight. He's like, no, 12 in the afternoon, Paul.
Yeah.
And he's like, you see these eyes? I'm tired, okay?
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, and so and eventually
Paul was partying so hard the night before.
I know. That's kind of like, look at these rock stars and they're like sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifestyle.
So, you know, the guy reluctantly gets invited in. Of course, there's like women hanging all over the place and running around and all that. And the ongoing bid is like, cut her out. Yeah. And honestly, that is kind of a funny joke. A girl will run past the screen and like Bruce or Paul will look and they're like, cut her out. Edit her out. Yeah, cut her out.
That's one of the few funny things in it.
It's pretty campy for the most part.
It's very campy. The best parts to me were the parts where they were semi-serious and were telling, you know, the history. They're telling the story of their history. The interview with Paul Gene just sitting there kind of telling the history.
Yeah.
While Gene's wearing a fucking Dracula cape or whatever the fuck.
I don't know.
Dracula cape with like white tracksuit pants, like sweatpants.
It's
that's his 80s demon, I guess.
Yeah, I think this video kind of demonstrates just sort of how out of sync they seem to be with everything. And it's like, again, there was, even at the time, because like I said, I remember this coming out, you know, you kind of got, you weren't able to really necessarily process it in your brain, but you could tell it was like, these guys didn't come off as cool at all to me. It just came off as sleazy and just, you know.
Like Paul was trying, like in hindsight watching it and knowing Paul's attitude, he was trying to be goofy every time he said it. He was trying to say everything with an air of like sarcasm and or wit.
Yeah, but
it didn't really come across, especially when I was a younger fan watching this, just to seem like an excited Paul. Now watching it, you see him trying to be comedic. He's like, I have to push my workout tape.
Yeah.
Or your workout. Yeah, come on, do something with me. Looking at it now, you see him trying to be funny.
Yeah,
but as a younger fan trying to take it all in at face value, it really doesn't feel like that.
You know, you say that. You know where Paul tends to be funny is when he's actually being very dry and sardonic. Here he's trying to be slapstick, and he's not, his timing and everything. You got to have a sense of timing for that. These guys don't really have that. You know,
no, they got jokes for days, but
I don't think any of these comedic interludes really worked all that well.
I didn't either.
You know what really was the bomb blast for everybody was to be able to finally see footage of the original Kiss in their full glory.
And that was like, was that a big, you know, driver for this release too?
It certainly was, at least in okay, this is how I remember this. In high school, I was in high school when this came out. And of course, by this point in high school, you had the media, we called it a media cart. They only had like so many of them. There was a cart that had a TV and a VCR on it, and you'd wheel it from room to room. You know, they had to share it. Not every room had a TV. You know, not every room had its own VHS player. They only had so many that the budget of the school board allowed, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Kind of how my school was.
Well, somehow, you know, our school was so big in this era where I went to school, there was over 3,000 kids in it for one school. It was the most populated school in the entire state at the time. And so the day had these weird, it was divided up in a weird way that there was actually 3 scheduled lunches. You either had the A, B, or C lunch. And of course, you know, for us, you know, hoodlum types, we would cut class. And, you know, the most common thing to do is you cut whatever class that corresponded with the ABC. You know, some guys would just go to all 3 lunches and, you know. Well, we found one of these media carts and snuck it into an empty classroom. And this we would do on the regular, to watch this video.
Now, was it on the media cart?
The video wasn't.
Okay,
we brought the video.
Okay, I was about to say. I was like, wait the fuck a minute.
No, we brought the tape from home.
Would y'all watch this in a closet?
No, we went into an empty classroom.
Oh, okay.
And we all gathered around and watched this. And, you know, the one piece of footage that really, really, we just watched over and fucking over was the black and white Winterland. Man, that was like... Everyone loved that. Everyone. There were people who were like, oh, man, Kiss sucks, man. Yeah, watch this. well, goddamn. Yeah, I mean, literally. I mean, people are like, the Kiss Sucks people were like, what the fuck is this? Because they're like, I didn't know, because what they had seen was tears are falling. Right? and instead what they got was like a fist to the throat.
They're just like, oh, wow, Kiss was actually good.
All of this makeup footage, man, that was the driver for this thing more so than anything else that was on this tape.
And also, and kind of rewatching some of the bits and pieces, I remembered when I was watching it, one of the other scenes I thought was really cool was the lead-in to them showing some of the old footage. They were also showing off some old costume pieces and things like that. Like, they hand-selected a few things and kind of dressed up a room with some cool old stuff. Yeah. And I thought that was really cool, too.
Yeah, I remember that, too. And but it's like it was the first time that they had kind of stopped, took a step back, and looked in the rearview mirror and said, here's where we've been. Mm-hmm. And of course, in that acknowledgement, what does that do? It just stokes the flames.
I was about to say.
And then everyone, God, I wish the original band would reunite. I wish the original band would reunite. I wish
Mm-hmm.
That's what everyone still wanted. Which goes back to my original theory that they could have continued as a makeup group, and bided their time and still have pulled off a comeback at some point. But they weren't going to pull it off with the lineup they had.
No.
And they weren't going to pull it off with Crazy Nights, as try as they might.
But no, there was some really good footage on here. So outside of just traditional music videos they released at the time, because that included like Lick It Up, Tears Are Falling, All Hell's Breaking Loose, blah, blah, blah. The good shit that's in there, like I mentioned, the I Love It Loud from Rio, Deuce from Winterland, Strutter, Detroit 76, Beth, Houston 77, Detroit Rock City, Australia 1980. That was the Unmasked tour. Yep. I watched that over and over.
Yeah, we did too.
Specifically because Paul does a different vocal melody on Detroit Rock City, and that's the only time he ever did it was on that tour consistently.
Right.
But it's on the
right. I know what you're talking about.
I like that.
I do too.
I like the other better, but as the odd variant, it's really cool.
Also, Eric Carr's ripping on that show too.
He doesn't play like Peter, but it is a monstrous performance.
They were really tight on that. I think the audio from that show, that Sydney show from 1980, I think they went back and doctored that.
The vocals were for sure.
The vocals.
For some reason, I went back into a Dynasty Unmasked phase on YouTube, of all places. And reading through some of the comments and clicking through a few different links and reading articles, I think they were planning on doing a lot more with those Australia dates, because I don't know if we mentioned it during the episode or not, but they actually did stop in a studio in Australia and give a lot of the Alive treatment.
Okay.
They redubbed a lot of guitars and vocals. So I think they were planning on doing a little bit more with that than just releasing the Inner Sanctum, which is, I think, what got released from it.
The Inner Sanctum has never popped up on YouTube. Is it the full Inner Sanctum that I used to have on? I probably still got it somewhere.
I think that's what sparked my interest in finding
Recently, there's a guy on YouTube that's doing these long Kiss Through the Years videos.
Yes.
They're really, really well done, really excellent.
I've seen a few of those where there's he takes the journals and stuff like that, or the audiobooks.
He's taking the audiobooks and using that as the narration. He's interspersing it with clips, and then he has commercials from respective eras to kind of harken back. They're really well done, but that had the most of the Inner Sanctum that I've ever seen on YouTube anywhere.
Okay, as of 1 year ago, someone uploaded the 43-minute special.
Okay, that might be it then. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so it's only been recent. I'm surprised that wasn't one of the first things uploaded straight away, because that's one of the first pieces of bootleg video I ever got 30 years ago.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So you got it all, that experience in the 70s, and then you have it again in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember getting these bootlegs back then. The first one I got was the Largo '79 Capitol Center Dynasty show, and you see a lot of these wavy lines. It's also in the home video for the Houston show for Exposed. Yep. Those wavy lines are caused by a signal interference from the volume of the the music. It's you can't get rid of it. I don't.
They have in recent technology.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe
crazy.
Now they can. Sorry.
Are you good?
I'm stomping on people's feet.
We're so excited over here.
Footsies under the table.
But yeah, Detroit Rock City from Australia, and then they filled it up with a few more modern videos, ending it out with "I Love It Loud." But then, which was cool, seeing the "I Love It Loud" music video. That didn't get a whole lot of rotation. So having that was cool.
That was really cool to see the full thing with the intro and the outro. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you had "I Stole Your Love" from Houston '77. Then Heaven's on Fire music video, Ladies Room Houston '77, and then Rock and Roll All Night from Australia 1980 with the cool little outro with like the cannon going off and shit. Where
that was the outro was from the Rio show.
Yeah. They end it with Rock and Roll All Night. They say something, and
then it goes to that.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep.
But no, I always thought that was also a cool little piece. It's like as much as the shit show the Creatures tour wound up being, that was a pretty cool outro for the time. Standing up on the cannon, having it shoot the fireworks.
I thought that was a cool stage. I would have enjoyed seeing that tour.
But Expose, this was honestly in heavy rotation for me as an early Kiss fan,
right?
Because
it's a good primer.
Yeah, like the live footage and all that too.
Correctly, Prima.
Because what I'm holding in my hand now is actually the original DVD that I got when I first saw it all. Because when, as I mentioned on our very first episode, when I first became a fan, it was right when like the Second Coming was coming out and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, so you had a lot of that.
So a lot of DVD reissues were happening at the time, so it was easy to find something like Exposed. And Mom was like, "Ooh, okay, if you're getting into Kiss now, I haven't even seen this in forever. Let's grab this." And like I remember both of us watching it till the end, and she's like, "What did you like?" And exactly what you said. I said, "I like the old footage, specifically the unmasked stuff.
Yeah.
I'd never seen anything from Unmasked before.
Right?
I'd seen the black and white footage because of the VHS tapes you sent us."
Did she have a problem with the nudity in it?
No, by that point, she had kind of. You know my mom. She was very much under, I would rather you see tits than someone chop a head off.
Right.
So she's like, at least the human body is more natural.
My parents were the other way around.
Right.
I don't understand what it was with the old school Cold War, moral majority kind of mentality that was like, okay, you want to watch someone get like riddled with bullets, that's okay, but those exposed breasts, well, that's bad.
Son, you want to come watch The Patriot and see somebody's head get like blown off with a cannonball?
Yeah, no. So
she was the Patriot.
Yeah.
So we can all feel good. Let's all baseball, hot dogs, apple pie,
patriotic as fuck, bro.
And some good wholesale murder.
Yeah. So she was much happier that I was into Kiss. That occasionally I'd run into some boobies rather than
that
being super into violent movies and shit like that.
I think it's interesting they got Mark Blankfield on here because I knew instantly who he was right away from having watched Fridays when I was a kid. I assume that's where that connection was made. But Mark Blankfield's star never really ascended. He made a movie it was probably before this, where he did this movie called Jekyll and Hyde Together Again, which was like a slapstick kind of piss take on Jekyll and Hyde. But
actually, one last little note about the front cover. One, everyone is photoshopped in at different things, or like either heads are replaced. One of the two. There's a lot of editing going on.
Bruce
in this photo.
And Eric are definitely photoshopped.
Okay, thank you. That's what I'm looking at.
We could pick up on that. That was the picture they used in the ad too.
Yeah,
you could see that straight away. It was so
only me and Paul get this group.
But then, at the very bottom, what seems like just a standard warning label. It looks like the Surgeon's General warning that you would find on a pack of cigarettes. It says, "Warning, contains situations that will discuss some and titillate others."
Yeah. Well, that's the way it opens. It's got Howard Marks doing the introduction.
Yep.
Howard Marks pops up at the introduction. He also pops up as the father in the I Love It Loud video. But that was Howard Marks. So for people that want to associate a face with that name, that was the guy. Is there anything else we want to pull off of this Kiss Exposed? I
have one final question about it. Do you think Paul and Gene were aware of the fan reaction to the old footage?
I think they were conscious going into it, or they wouldn't have leaned onto it so heavy.
That's a good question mark. Coming out of it, they had to have been.
Well, I think leading in, and for one producer reason, when they started talking about all the tapes. So they made the joke about, oh, this was during the Love Gun era where, all these girls were vowing to be Gene's gun holster. Yes.
It makes it imply like they've got sex tapes and stuff, which I'm sure don't actually exist.
But as soon as they started talking about footage that they weren't going to show, the cameraman was eagerly reaching like, oh, I want to see that. I want to see that.
That's when he was making some sort of reference that it's like a sex tape.
Well, but then anytime other footage would come up, he was like grasping.
Well, have we talked about the videos, like the ownership issues? How like there's a lot of weird dynamics to these videos.
We may have touched on it, but now would be a good time.
Yeah, a lot of minutia with this too.
Well, I mean, I'm only pulling this off of like what I've heard off of. I think it's Kurt Gooch talked about this on other podcasts. So I don't want to misstate it, but the way I understand it is that, yes, you might own this video, but you don't own the music that's contained on the video. Whereas the music that's, so you could have like literally like that's the what holds these things up is licensing issues, because somebody owns the music, somebody owns the rights to the footage, and then someone actually owns the physical copy. Does it make sense? Of the master copy.
Yep. So that actually makes total sense. Which is why you'll see sometimes these bootlegs come up on YouTube that are silent.
Right.
Because someone wound up only being able to purchase the rights to the footage.
Yeah.
They don't own the rights to the soundboard audio because some other collector owns the master copy to that. And then if they want to release it, guess who else they have to go through? Universal, because they own the actual song.
So it's like a convergence of things that happen. Like, it's interesting. The Paul Lynde Halloween special, there is a DVD of that you can buy. And it's a high grade quality, but the person that owns it has never officially licensed it for release. So that is technically an illegal thing. But he's never gone after anybody. He's never sued anybody.
Well, the thing
is, somebody tried to put out Kiss Meets the Phantom, and that got shut down.
Well, see, the Paul Lynde special you're talking about, even that version was an extremely high grade, like first gen copy.
Yeah,
that still wasn't
right.
The master.
It wasn't the master, right?
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
No, and you know what? I got to see that, and I got to hold that exact DVD in my hand. You know where, of all places, I got it? Netflix. Back in the day when they still did DVDs, they had it. Yeah. And I remember Mom and I just hopped on there. We were swapping it out. Really?
Yeah, I think you can still find it.
But I just remember that being one of those we were just flipping through, and I was like, oh, what? We immediately added it. Like the next day, we like popped popcorn, sat down, watched it.
Well, speaking of lawsuits, we'll get into some of this because, as they kind of crash through the 80s here, they're kind of going from one crisis to another. They're always like scrambling for cash, and you think, how are they doing that? Why are they doing that? Because they squandered their money. I mean, and to a certain extent, you could make the argument that the money wasn't necessarily squandered so much as it was invested in trying to bring this, magnificent, massive stage show on the road. But they didn't see a return on these investments.
I'm sure Ron Nevison wasn't, a cheap purchase either.
That's about to play into
all this.
Shit.
On the Animalized tour, at one point, they were forced to, quote unquote, beg. That's Chris Lentz word from his book. Beg for cash from the record company in advance. And you got to remember, an advance is just that. It's an advance that they're going to have to pay back. But that was just to keep the show on the road. And as we talked about in the last episode, there was a date where they had a meeting with Glickman Marx, and the group is starting to feel like they're being mismanaged. Although the paperwork supports the truth, they're just not listening. Ironically, Howard Marks had hoped to make a bogus play by probably out of desperation here, projecting a $5 million income over the next 24 months. I don't know how they were supposed to do that. So he gets Chris Lent and the group, who's the touring accountant, and then the group's the accountant a guy named David Weidenbaum.
Yeah,
and they make an effort to cook the books to prove, support this projection, but it's beyond even the symbolic fix. And like I said, we were talking about the legal ramifications of these footage and stuff. The group is getting sued, and they're getting sued a lot. Right out of one of the big ones was the company that supplied the lasers for the '79 Dynasty tour.
Coming back,
saying the lasers worked. Now maybe they didn't work to the effect that you were trying to create, but the lasers worked. So therefore, you were in breach. You've cost us lost revenue for having gone through.
It took them a while to get that out, though, right?
Well, I mean, these things get dragged out in court.
Yeah, I mean, relatively, that's like less than 10 years.
Yeah, So I'm saying this is all across the 80s. I don't have specific dates, but all this stuff is going on. Vinny Poncia has Kiss's books audited. I think we talked about this in a previous episode. They settle with them and pay them off because they want to keep on a amicable kind of...
Yeah, because we were kind of discussing it. Was like, that's one of the last few people they've really got.
But Michael James Jackson also sued for unpaid royalties.
And they're like, fuck you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he had not received any payments or any accounting claims for over a year. So he either sued or threatened to sue, and they had to settle and pay him off. Now you got to remember, all of this is occurring while they're still not reaping in the income that they need to. Everything that's coming in is going straight back out. Vinnie Vincent sued for the first time.
And you got to pay these.
He got his fucking money then.
You still got to pay these lawyers.
I always hear the thing of like he always loses.
No. Not to the information I got. This first time or at least the settlement. So but this is for publishing royalties.
How much did he get? Did they say?
Nope. I don't think that these. I'm getting this information from the Chris Lent book,
right?
And I think that there's probably a legal thing. Usually they don't get to say how much money.
Yeah, if they go out of court for it,
the implication is. It's hurting. It's biting into their income.
Yeah.
A group, they had signed a merchandising deal with a company called Rock Tours Limited to handle the Creatures of the Night tour, and then they also negotiated a deal for Lick It Up. But then Winterland came in and they renegotiated a deal, or set up a deal with Winterland, and just were like, we'll just have to take our chances with this guy. Well, they took their chances. A suit. but they were able to beat it. But of course, again, it's racking up needless lawyers' fees.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Legal fees are expensive. This isn't like small amounts of money. Bill Coin pops up.
Hey,
he's threatening to sue, or maybe he did. I don't know, but he was able to negotiate a one-time cash buyout. Bye, go away. Peter Criss the same way. He pops up. They have to buy him out, pay him off. Now, what they get in return for that
makeup
has benefited them to this day.
So this is where all of this happens.
But at the time,
yes, that is actually that's how they actually got a little bit of cash too, because they cut off some of what they owed him.
Probably, I'm sure.
Because Peter came looking for money.
Yeah,
and they were like, "Well, we won't give you this much, but we'll give you this much if you give us over the makeup."
The company Kiss would rent gear from, typically the PA and stuff is all rented. It's sublet off something else.
Yeah.
Well, they rented the gear to go to South America. And as we talked about in that episode, on the way back, the promoters seized the gear and held it for ransom. Mm-hmm. Well, now the company that actually owned that gear sued Kiss for lost revenue.
So, bro, this was like cartels and shit.
So, I mean, Kiss are like, this is just a shit show of like, and now the best part, or worst, is this coal mine tax shelter that they got involved with in the late 70s.
Oh.
And what essentially happened here is they a tax shelter, of course, means it shields your money from being taxed when you collect the return on that investment. These things were, to this day, people, investors are always looking for good tax shelters. And at the time, It was thought that this was a mutually benefited kind of thing. You're investing in coal, you're investing in natural resources. That's obviously a positive, and to invest in our natural resources will provide a tax shelter, blah, 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 blah. Well, in the early 80s, these tax shelters were canceled. The returns could be worth 3 or 4 times the initial investment. So it was a good thing, and probably were seeing returns, but they were taking that money and spending it on other things
like lawyers and
also their own lifestyles, the houses and whatever they might have had, but also they're investing it into the band's stage tours and stuff, which of course, as we've talked about, none of them, since even the Dynasty tour, were making money. So this money is sort of just kind of bleeding out. This is their investment money that primarily was set up so they would have money, income to retire on.
Yeah.
Well, these tax shelters are canceled, and now taxes are owed retroactively
for X
plus interest.
What the fuck?
How many?
Which would be more than the amount they initially invested to start with.
God, for how many years too?
This would go about 10 years. 10 years, yeah. This was giant. I know this gets kind of overlooked and glossed over. This is giant. This sinks the whole thing. I don't think people realize just how bad of a situation they are in.
Because I always heard they made bad real estate choices or something like that. Like they were buying land and some of that really didn't work out.
They were able to sell that stuff off and liquidate it, and a lot of this was done to help pay off the expenses too. I mean, they had some successful investments, and that's mentioned in Chris Lent's book. But I think a lot of the positives got wiped out primarily by this. I mean, as individuals, they have their own money, although the accounting was so messed up that Paul's electric bill was never paid at one point, and he was put into the dark temporarily, which is funny. It's funny because it's like you don't pay your own electric bill. Oh no, of course your accountant does all that, But I think it just goes to show how much that they were trying to juggle that something such an obvious simple expense would get lost.
Could also just imagine, like, again, Paul's not in the poorhouse yet. He's still, like you said, he's still got some personal money in the bank. The band funds and the record company may be hurting, but everyone still has a couple bucks in their pocket.
Probably,
imagine,
but there's no income. But
imagine being Paul, knowing you have at least $100 in the bank account, and all of a sudden your power just goes.
Oh yeah.
You're like, wait, the fuck?
Yeah.
Oh no, I can't see.
Oh no!
I'm gonna write a song called "The X in Sex."
I don't know. I just know that, I mean, it's a bad situation, which means they're still going to have to continue to work and do what they can to bring income in, because they're not the superstar mega rich band that everyone seems to think they are. And to the point, that whole Kiss Exposed video makes it look like they are living this lavish lifestyle, which they are clearly not. They can't afford to live a lavish lifestyle, even if they have money in the bank. The cars were rented. The houses often were rented. They don't, there's not a lot that they actually own. This isn't an unusual story. A lot of bands find themselves in these situations. There's the famous story of Black Sabbath, being, waking up one day and realizing that everything that they thought they owned actually belonged to their managers.
Yeah.
But here it belongs to them, but it just, and maybe you could make the argument that Glickman Marks weren't really as adept as they should have been. I don't know. But at this point, it's all moot, because, they have to figure out a way to negotiate their way out of this mess with the tax man, which they will do. And we'll get to that in a minute. But not before they fire Glickman Marks. The only person, they clean house.
Yep.
This is done in March of 1988 while they're still on tour. They do this. They make this phone call from the road.
Kind of a cowardly way to do it.
They retain their lawyer, a guy named Paul Marshall, and management is taken over by a man named Jesse Hilson, who was Paul's psychiatrist.
Yeah, we brought that up in the last episode too.
Why?
Yeah, we didn't go in. We kind of teased it.
I don't understand the logic behind this.
So Paul Stanley says in this book, and it's kind of infuriating. He says, like, we hired my therapist to be our lawyer, and some people would say, why would you do that? Well, there's just a lot of things in KISS that you just go against the grain on in so many words.
That's his justification. Is there's so many things in KISS that we went against the grain. Why not make my therapist our manager?
What could possibly go wrong?
Okay, discount Paul's opinion on this. How did Gene go along with this?
I don't think Gene was involved. I don't think
he had to be involved to that point. I mean, you have to.
This is what I'm thinking. So, I reference Paul is the only one that actually kind of talks about this era in any of the resource or any of the band books, really. Like even Gene kind of glosses over this era because he wasn't really mentally there. And Paul mentions that this was the era in which he kind of pulls Gene to the side and was like, look, I'm tired of carrying this by myself. You need to step up at least a little bit.
That's good rhetoric, but we're going to find out that isn't exactly accurate.
Oh, so you actually have something that kind of...
yeah, of course.
Okay, yeah. You're like, of course I do. Anything you have to say, I've got something.
I know.
That's the narrative I've heard too.
That is the narrative. Mm-hmm. It makes perfect sense, and there's probably a sizable kernel of truth to that.
Yeah, and he was saying that, it wasn't fixed in that one conversation. It opened up the conversation for a month long or, however long it took to, fully get them back into play.
You've got Gene, who's negotiated a deal with RCA to form his own imprint, Simmons Records.
Yeah.
He releases albums by groups called House of Lords, which was members of Angel, I think.
Yeah.
A group called Silent Rage. A group called Gypsy Rose. I mean, these are very 80s
household names.
None of them do well. He manages, in some level, Liza Minnelli.
Yeah, he talks about that in his book too,
which goes nowhere and does nothing. But what we always hear about, he's out mogling. He's starting a record label. He's managing acts. He's getting movie roles.
So he's got his KISS manager, and he also has his entertainment manager, and then his business manager.
Gene's just not involved. Paul Stanley also forms his own management agency. Did y'all know this?
No.
Not his own management agency, no.
It's called Immaculate. This is not a joke.
I'm sorry, I was not expecting that.
This is not a joke.
This feels like a Mad TV skit.
Oh, Paul, do you have I understand you're starting your own...
Hey, Paul.
What's the name of your record? I saw the look on your face. Don't even.
He said in full makeup.
It's called Immaculate. Oh, God. So he's representing at least two acts. You can't make this shit up. Unchained and a band called Racket, spelled with two T's.
Of course. Yeah.
All right.
That's very rat
And
of
he
them.
is also trying to score acting roles, but he's not having any success with it. Before they fire Glickman Marks, Howard Marks has pretty much devoted himself wholly to KISS, to the expense of his own advertising agency, and to Paul in particular. And at some point, and Chris Lent's words, Howard Marks was despondent over trying to find Paul an acting gig because obviously Paul was riding his ass. I want to act too. I want this too, and he's getting. I guess he's getting auditions that go nowhere, but Howard Marks is making calls with his connections at ICM and CAA to no avail.
And they're just
Can't get his calls returned.
They're just like, we saw you in that KISS Exposed video, and we're just like, nuh-uh.
So, Paul is trying desperately to go, blow by blow with Gene. He wants all the same stuff. He's just not successful at it. Mm-hmm. And so, conveniently, all of this is overlooked in Paul's memoirs.
Yeah,
because you're always the hero of your own
band.
What, his own solo band? We'll get to that.
Yeah,
we'll get to that because all this is important to what the point we're going to make here in a minute. Because some of this, kind of seems contradictory. But Eric is working with a band, interestingly enough, from Rock Hill, South Carolina.
Really, I haven't heard this story.
And they're called New York. New York. From South Carolina. Rock Hill.
We're not too far from Rock Hill.
For people that don't know,
I was in Rock Hill last night.
Rock Hill is right across the state line from Charlotte. Charlotte's on the state line of North and South Carolina, and Rock Hill is essentially a suburb of Charlotte.
Yeah,
for lack of a better term.
Yeah, that's right.
But Rock Hill, I can remember this band advertising their stuff in the back of magazines. There was a couple of bands that they self-promoted to the point of buying quarter-page ads in the back of like Circus Magazine. New York was one of them. Never heard them, don't know anything about them, never seen their stuff available, which you would think it would be at least marginally easily come by around here, or being that we're in the area.
Yeah.
Never have.
Nobody's got any demos.
And it's interesting, it's like, I would have thought, maybe they would have opened for the local Kiss shows. That never happened. But then, again, Eric isn't a full member. He's just he doesn't have that much clout. But it is interesting to note that, the band he's working with is basically from our neck of the woods. Bruce produces a demo himself for a band called Electric Angels, which features a young Ryan Roxy, who now plays with Alice Cooper.
Oh, wow.
And one of the songs is called You Put the X in Sex.
Oh, shit.
Dun, 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 dun.
Kiss will resolve their tax debt. Back to the tax debt. They will resolve their tax debt by negotiating a settlement and paying it off by selling their publishing to a Japanese company called Hori America, Hori. I guess that's how it's pronounced.
Hori.
But before they do, and I don't think that they knew that this was going to happen, but it is convenient. They're going to release a new compilation album.
Yes.
Smashes, thrashes, and hits. Which is, I guess, the reason why we're sitting here today.
Snickers, kickers, and pickers.
Pretty much. With new music.
With 2 new songs.
Yeah.
But this compilation is also an effort to take their back catalog and update it with new remixed versions. All of these songs are remixed, I think, in some fashion.
Most of them, yeah.
Yeah. And the idea here is to update the sound quality.
Or have it be more with the times.
Yeah, and I don't think it works, but I mean, I don't think we're going to go track by track here. I'd like to go. I want to hit on a couple of songs here.
Yeah, there's a couple of things to point out with some specific things, though.
All right, so when I was digging into this, I actually have a weird connection with Smashes. I'm not saying I like it, but I have a weird connection with it because when I've told that story about being in like 2nd or 3rd grade and my art teacher giving me the option of using a Ace Frehley Les Paul guitar as kind of a theme for a art project, he was like, "Oh, so you're a fan of Kiss?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, I've got some vinyl records at home. If it's okay with your mom, I'll give them to you." One of the 2 was Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits. So I was, oh my God, I've got Kiss on vinyl now. Wow, all that stuff. So I remember listening to that stuff intently because I was like, wow, this record just sounds really different than the CDs mom has. So always growing up with this record's kind of always had an odd place for me of like, a lot of this is kind of like my first experience with some of the songs. Mm-hmm. So hearing the differences is very evident to me.
Well, before we get into that, should we go through the originals first? These 2 new original songs.
Yeah, we can spend the 2 minutes on both.
The record.
Yeah, we can spend the 2 minutes on both of them.
Yeah, because they're.
Well, let's
do it proper. Let's do it proper.
We the first song is "Let's Put the X in Sex." Now again, we just referenced
title ever.
We just referenced there was a song that Bruce was working on called "You Put the X in Sex." It's almost certain they copped the title.
Hey, Bruce, I got a great title for a song, "The X in Sex." Bruce was like, "What?"
No, Bruce, but Bruce would have brought it to the table because this was with the group that Bruce was producing.
Oh, that's right. And Paul's just kind of like,
These songs are recorded in July of '89 at Right Track Studios, and they're co-written with Desmond Child. I think Diane Warren co-writes "You Make Me Rock Hard," the other track, along with Desmond Child again.
Diane Warren wrote the song for fucking Titanic,
and I'm not
she
sure.
also wrote "You Make Me Rock Hard."
Yeah, well, I mean, she's written a lot of hit songs.
She has.
Hey, you know what? It's making music by the hour. It's not, they're clocking in and they're just writing.
Yeah, I'm just part of it's kind of like bravo.
That is now how music, popular music is made. It's like there's staff songwriters that go in on Monday and they're like, "What's today? Today is R&B day. We're going to write an R&B song."
Yeah, that's what
they
Desmond
come in on
Child
Tuesday.
did too.
They clock in. What's today? We're going to write a country song. Well, we don't really have. Well, we got leftover R&B. Well, let's just put a country twang to it, and that becomes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's today? Today is we're going to do the commercial for Sears or whoever. That's what that's literally how these songs are written, and that's and people buy it, so it is what it is.
Hey.
I mean, it's completely emotionalist, it's completely academic, and it's completely without any regard for quality whatsoever, other than can we sell, and then it's like once it's how long has it got to sell? It's just got to sell long enough to make some money, and then we'll have another one. It's processed like cheese. That's the music industry. That's why commercial music is so fucking terrible. But I'm gonna get off my.
I know.
That's partly why these songs are so bad, because they're written with that kind of mindset. It's like, we need a fast, cheap, quick, easy, quote unquote hit song, because like we said, they're in a lot of trouble here, and I don't know how they think this is going to work. Let's put the X and Sex. I don't even know who's playing on this outside of Paul and Bruce.
I think Paul does the bass on both of them too, or he at least does the bass on X and Sex.
And I guess it sounds like a live drum, but I'm also sure that there's a drum machine. There's drum machine programming.
It's Alan Schwartzberg in the back,
Play
on top of it.
But this song, I mean, I see Alex is like, he's like rearing back here. He's like chomping at the bit. What do you got to say?
I hate the song. I just hate it. It's fucking horrible. The music video is terrible. The song is terrible. There's barely any fucking guitar in it. It's all synthesizer. And the same thing is, if Paul Stanley was sitting here next to me, he'd be nodding right along. He, in hindsight, does not like this shit.
What's your take there, Cap?
It's like it's trying to be like a Rolling Stone song, but like really shitty 80s version of it. You know what I mean? With the horns and everything too.
Man, the riff is there. There is a riff there, but it's buried
it's
under that.
Women.
It's is it? You think?
It's kind of, sort of.
Kind of. I think it's a cool riff.
I mean, it's a fine guitar riff.
Again, it's like we've talked about this 100 times, and it just, you hear the potential.
Yeah.
But it's not realized.
It's buried. It's under, all that ruins it.
It's buried under all that keyboard, that fake keyboard horn, and that weird. What's that? It's not a clavel.
Oh, the clavinet. The bump.
It's like a synthesized clavinet.
Yeah,
that sounds. But
they try to be funky with it, and it's not.
And it just, because they want to have a dance beat, and then just, I feel like they were copying from George Michael, who had a hit a year or two before with a song called "I Want Your Sex," which at the time was very edgy. Yeah. It was the conservative 80s, and a song like that was very, very edgy. So now they feel like, oh, well, now he did it, so can I. But it's not
following trends, not setting them.
There was George Michael, whether you like him or not, is irrelevant to the issue. His song was, I don't know, it had its own kind of genuine kind of thing to it.
Right. It was huge.
This has just a smug kind of opportunistic kind of thing to it.
I agree with that.
It was just a bad idea. It was a bad song. It had, again, the riff had the potential to be a better song.
Yeah, I could see that.
Or like Hot Legs, that's another song that it reminds me of.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cool riff. It really is. If you listen to it again, you'll hear it and you'll go, why did they do that with this? Why did they waste this on this song?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it has the potential to be a much better song. I don't know how you do it, but I'm sure somebody that took a little time, care, and concern beyond just trying to piss out some throwaway track.
By the way, wasn't there like a strip club chart or something like that in the 80s, or does that still exist? I remember hearing Paul Stanley or Gene talk about how these songs would get on strip club charts and shit like that.
I've never heard that.
I don't know. That's the only time I heard it, but I remember them talking about it.
It was number 7 nationwide on the
strip
club chart.
It was exactly something like that.
I can't even imagine that. How would you even? I don't want to know. Because it gets worse. It's not. There's 100 reasons to hate this next one. You make me, in parentheses, you make me rock hard. It's rock hard, but you make me rock hard. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Get it. Also written by Desmond Child. This is the one that's co-written with Diane Warren.
Again, Oscar winner.
You would think that, this is hardly the hit you'd think this trio would create. Given the track record of all the people involved, maybe even minus Paul Stanley, this is what they came up with.
You know what the worst part about both of these songs is? They're the exact same song in that one part in both choruses where it goes, what's it in Rock Hard? Da 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 da. They do the same thing in X and Sex.
There's that pre-chorus.
I like the pre-chorus.
I love that part. I'm like, there's again a kernel of a song.
Yeah,
it would be
Diane
very
Warren work
song,
right there.
But it lasts like 3 seconds as a pre-chorus. I'm like, whoa, stop. Cut that out and build off of that, and you might have something that you can work with. It'd be very poppy, but it's still better than the rest of this song, which seems like it's completely a throwaway.
Well, see, here, I have nothing to add than exactly what you said. I want to talk about the videos for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Because one, let's put the X and Sex. That's like some weird Art Deco, Vogue,
okay, there's a reason for that.
It's the art director they brought in.
Is a woman named Rebecca Blake. Ironically, she directed Prince's Kiss video. But it's true. The other thing you've got to remember is these are also very obvious ripoffs to Robert Palmer, who was having a string of hits in the same time
with the dancing girls.
And the music is similar. Everything it's like they went from Crazy Nights being what's Bon Jovi doing to what's Robert Palmer doing,
what's Van Halen's hairdresser what are her rates,
maybe he's working with Robert Palmer now, I don't know. Now, but both of these videos and the songs are direct rips of Robert Palmer, particularly Let's Put the X in Sex.
Well, it's like that song and video, as weird as this video is, there's still essence of Kiss. There's still shades of Kiss because there's a little bit of the black leather. They're in a city. There are girls. That
could be any band.
But what I'm saying is but I'm saying that leading into, do you remember what the set piece for You Make Me Rock Hard is, Russ?
Is it a circus?
A circus trapeze tent.
Trapeze,
Yeah. So you know what? When I'm comparing the two, I want to go, Let's Put the X in Sex has a little bit more of a Kiss feel because they're already doing the prototype Psycho Circus.
Which was in itself bad, but we won't
Yes, I know.
One odd thing about both videos is that Paul Stanley does not play guitar in any of them.
He does not hold a guitar because he is quoted in saying that he, at that point, did not feel like Kiss was the 4 members. It felt like it was his band. So he wanted to be a front man and didn't want to have a guitar.
That's fine, and that speaks into everything that we're getting here to. As this winds down the year, both of these come out in the fall of '88. Neither one does anything.
No.
And as they go into the year 1989, Paul does...
Well, do we want to talk remixes real quick?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
So... I got down to a certain amount of notes, and then something happened, and I'll get into it because it actually ties into an old episode and something we talked about there. So, a lot of what I'm citing here actually comes from a website called axologyextended.wordpress.com. Back in 2019, he actually wrote out an entire dissertation talking about the remix of Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits.
Yeah, there's some of that I found Kiss Fact. The same thing. I was going to suggest that if people were really that deeply interested, they could go look at it. But if you want to touch on, because
this article really gets into the mixing minutia. Because when growing up, I assumed they triggered the drums. Like they were able to grab the signal to know when the snare was going to hit. They were able to grab the signal to know when the kick was going to hit.
They definitely changed the drum sound.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. So it sounded like they were able to like get, you know, a old Casio computer keyboard rather to read when certain snare and kicks were going to hit, and they could just play the samples over top. Technology was to the point it could do that.
We're getting ahead of ourselves here. Or maybe we aren't. We did note that all of these songs have been remixed to have an updated modern sound.
Yes. So with the drum, that's what I'm about to get into. With the drums, though, they were not triggered. It was actually a full remix, and then the article gets a lot more in depth on how they did it, but it has to do with a bit of compression and
a lot of geeky shit,
a lot of squashing, a lot of really nerdy stuff that I'll save you. So essentially, they pulled in all, and this is very important for the Eureka moment I had earlier. This is for the very first time, they're actually doing proper remixes.
Right.
Because on Double Platinum, they had to kind of rush things. And they got, remember we were talking about, they got like mix-matched things, and they're having to kind of piece things together. And everything was done in such a manic state, even like flying things over like within 24 hours. A lot of shit got mixed up. So with this is the first time they can actually sit down, edit, do some shit, and they really did some odd shit with the snare and the kick. Made it sound like every single 80s.
Like
yes.
ZZ Top did the same thing.
I think they had a directive. It was like, okay, here, hey, we've got the notes here. We've got really detailed notes. What Paul wants. What's it say?
Neuter it.
It says, just make it sound like ass.
So
okay, say no more.
More reverb.
So that was the idea, because in the 80s everything got to be like super wet reverb. I hated the 80s production style.
I did too. When I was a kid, I was just like, oh, is it from 1980 whatever? Nah.
So every song that's a classic song, aside from I Was Made for Loving You, has remixed drums. Every single classic song does.
Yeah.
But here are some extra little bits that I found in each one that I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. In Love Gun, you do hear a little bit extra ambience with either the EBO or keyboards.
No, that was the one thing. We've talked about these drone notes before.
Yes.
That were on Paul's solo album and on Love Gun. Mm-hmm. That is the EBO. I did not even think of that back then.
Okay.
So we did these episodes. So explain what an EBO is.
Well, we discussed it on Paul's record. Yeah, so it was kind of like the electronic pick device.
Yeah,
and
you kind of hold it to your string and it makes the string hum without actually picking the string. Yeah.
So they definitely either raised or added more EBO effect. And honestly, the messed up thing, we can go back and listen to it on the Love Gun Deluxe. This version with the messed up snare and the louder EBO sounds like the demo. It sounds like Paul's original demo, because his demo had a lot more of that ambience.
Yeah, we talked about that when we talked.
This really pulls back to that, and they did one extra interesting thing. They do a vocal cut right before Ace's big outro.
That's the one thing I really loved about this whole album. I was like, man, if they hadn't have just like totally fucked up the drums, cutting out the vocals on that outro or coda or whatever you want to call it, and letting just the lead play, man, because that's such a great run.
It is.
It really is.
That's why we love the Alive 2 version.
And it's so much like, it's like, it shows how good Ace was.
Yep.
You could make the argument Ace wasn't a great guitar player. That's fine. We've talked about this.
Right. Yeah.
But man, that's just a cool thing. It's like, it's just cool. Maybe it's not good or whatever, you know what I mean?
Right.
But it's fucking cool.
Detroit Rock City, not much really changed on it, though it shares the same thing with Deuce.
Well, wait. Go Detroit Rock City. Do they do the thing not where yet. It says gotta lose your mind? You know where I'm talking about? They put it on
the first times that happens is on Greatest Kiss 95.
Well, it's on Double Platinum.
Oh, okay. But no, it's not on this one. Okay. It's not on this one.
But all the Destroyer tracks are kind of just louder,
Well, not really. So this shares a similar problem that Deuce does, and I'm skipping over a song. But Detroit Rock City and Deuce both have an interesting problem. If you listen to it, there's only one guitar.
I'd have to go back.
Specifically on Deuce. I played it for Cap earlier. I played the first record.
What I noticed on Deuce was they put some sort of phase effect on the guitar.
On the intro guitar. But by the time the verses kick in, there's only one guitar playing. You only hear a second guitar kick in on the Baby If You're Feeling Good.
Right.
They trimmed all of Ace's rhythm tracks. Only kept his additional rhythm.
Is it Ace's rhythm track or is it Paul's rhythm track?
I'm thinking with the way everything's rolling with
Ace
this.
is the one that put the little stutter on that lick.
Well,
so that would have been Ace's rhythm track, I would think.
Well, where's the stutter you're talking about?
On Deuce.
Which part of the riff?
Sing it, Russ.
He did that.
Yeah,
he has a little stutter. It's not as pronounced in the live versions, which I don't like the stutter so much. I think he's still playing it, but it
just really sounds like if they're cutting a guitar, logic would dictate to me it wouldn't be Paul's. That's where I'm pulling from. But there's a distinct lack of a guitar on both Detroit Rock City, but primarily Deuce. You could really hear it on Deuce, especially anytime they hold a note. Mm-hmm. You can hear on the original studio track 2 guitars holding a note. This one's very much a clangy single guitar. But that's at least what I noticed. But we do get an extended outro on Deuce. And that's really cool.
Yeah.
All the guitars are pumped up in that too, from what I remember.
Yeah. I Love It Loud suffers the worst from the drum thing. Because that record, Creatures of the Night, had such a monstrous drum sound. So it was like boom, boom, pow.
Well, that was to me, that was the whole overall arc of the 80s production style. That was at the advent of it. Everybody wanted that huge drum sound. It never sounded huge to me. It always sounded muddy. It was just so. And I mean, this is everybody's everything. Mm-hmm. And, when Danzig's first record came out, that was such a left field thing because it was so bone dry. Yeah, I can't tell you how radical that sounded when it came out. Or
the Cult Electric record,
both produced by Rick Rubin. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's finally the guy that said, "Man, enough of this shit.
Enough of the fucking reverb on every snare."
But everything had to sound like fucking Dawkins. And Dawkins sucked.
And they also cut out the fade out, or the fade back in, rather, from I Love It Loud. And the other interesting thing they did with that, though, is they turned Gene's vocal up and got rid of the effect. It's a lot more of a dry, loud vocal on it.
Yeah, the only other one I can remember is like Calling Dr. Love.
So hold on 1 minute before you get to that one. Okay. I warned you before we got on here. I had a eureka what the fuck moment, and I'm getting to it because that's the last note I made was Deuce. Because Lick It Up and Heaven's on Fire, they didn't do anything to it.
Right.
So I get to Dr. Love. And let's reverse back to our episode on Rock and Roll Over. When we get to that song, I mentioned one of my little nerd minutia facts. And I'm like, you know what? When this song kicks in, Peter's very first crash, it almost sounds like a tape wobble. So like you've got a cassette tape in your car, it fucks up, you wind it back up, but it doesn't still play right. It still has that little in it. The cymbal crash always sounded like it was a punch in, and I could never place it. I'm listening to this version of Calling Dr. Love. Number one, they extended the guitar intro because originally it starts with 1 guitar, then 2, and then the drums kick in. This one starts with 2 guitars from the top, so that shows that they had extra guitars already. Then they had that weird before he sings.
That's on the double platinum one. But that was actually at the front of the...
You're right. It didn't have the extra guitar lick. But guess what? When you listen underneath that loud guitar piece, guess what's not there? A fucking crash cymbal. The crash is not there.
Alex, it's okay.
No, I will not. Because as soon as I was listening to that, I was listening for the crash. I was like, I wonder if it's more pronounced on this because of the remix. There's not even a crash cymbal there. So that sent me down this trail of like, what the fuck? And I started listening. You can hear the squeak on the kick drum. Mm-hmm. You can hear the pedal squeaking.
Right.
I went back to... Rock and Roll Over. You don't hear the squeak. I'm going, what is going on here? I Google it. That's when I come across this website. They, in passing, mention Rock and Roll. Calling Dr. Love. They mainly talk about Rock and Roll All Night for a very specific reason, but it all ties in. Remember when I wanted to talk about remixes on double platinum? But no, we just had to zoom on by that. No, this is shit that happened all the way back then when everyone was rapidly trying to get these master tapes sent out to Neil Bogart so he can do the remixes for double platinum. They weren't sending final masters. They were sending alternate masters. The Dr. Love that's on there is not the same drum track.
Oh.
It is a different drum track. It got mixed up during that initial master send-off.
Interesting.
So, cycle all the way to the end of the record, you've got a really shitty version of Rock and Roll All Night with those drums. But all of a sudden, something else pops out at you. A completely different bass line from Gene.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask about that.
Yes, that comes from the same thing. The drum tracks were... I pull up the website now. The drum tracks for Dress to Kill were recorded at a specific studio, and I'm getting that pulled up here. I should have had that ready.
I did the same thing with the Willie Nelson song yesterday.
Dude, okay, yeah, here we go.
So, Dress to Kill was recorded at Electric Lady.
They recorded two different pieces, though, and that's what I'm trying to get.
Dress to Kill or
Dress to Kill.
Okay, and not Rock and Roll Over.
Okay, it said, quoting Axology Extended, it said, see, in early 75, Kiss were in California and ended up in a studio called Libre Sound, and they recorded a number of interesting things. Among them were eventually ended up the drum tracks for, you guessed it, Rock and Roll All Night. Thing is, the version that was recorded in January 75 was way far incomplete and differed from the album version in a number of ways. Apart from a relatively rough vocal track from Gene, one of the main differences is the bass line. In January, Gene still hadn't written the descending figure that would be the bedrock upon the song would rest. Instead, he went to some of his go-to stylistic moves. So when you compare the two, instead of going down, he's doing do. He's walking up with the riff. So the track that got sent to the studio had an old bass cut on it.
Interesting.
So the version on Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits is a completely different take of Rock and Roll All Night than what's on the studio record.
It was, and all of this for a shitty fucking remix that wasn't really worth listening to.
I just thought it sucks.
Now you have to understand, though, coming from a fan that's listened to this record since a kid.
You seem really excited about this.
It was
cool.
It was mind blowing to me because it had been sitting under my nose the entire time, and especially with it messing with me with Dr. Love.
Right.
And I'm like, I've never dug into it before. Now realizing the unorganized state of the Kiss camp, sending around these masters, things getting mislabeled, and then when they're trying to go back in time to do another remix, a song like Calling Dr. Love is a remix of a remix.
Yeah, and it seems like this stuff obviously wasn't cataloged in any kind of organized way. But, it's interesting that they wouldn't... I guess, in the moment, they're not considering their own legacy. I mean, no one knew when they made Rock and Roll All Night that Rock and Roll All Night would become Rock and Roll All Night.
Exactly.
But it would still seem like there would be a better organization of your own stuff, but
no. So thank you for telling me that I was going to have to really dig into the changes on the.
Yeah,
we skip over a few of there. Like Shout Out Loud has an extended outro after the wow.
It ends with the Shout It, which is that was very kind of an 80s pop metal kind of a thing.
Rock and Roll All Night also has an extended outro, but I think that also has to do with the different master tape they got sent.
But my whole thing is I just couldn't get past that drum sound.
I can't either.
And
it was
interesting
hard
because I think the snare sound is the only thing they seem to really have messed with. It's like they try to get this bright, popping, reverb-heavy snare, but everything else sounds flat and dull behind it. Like,
definitely
all
check
the
out
toms and everything. It's like, I don't know.
If we have any music producer listeners and fans of the show, definitely go to that website. He goes into the minutia of how they got the sound from pre-recorded drums already. For me, it was fascinating. I'll just save our listeners
What was the website? Say it one more time for people.
Get that pulled up one more time. Axologyextended.wordpress.com, and the title of the article is "Get Up and Get Your Remix Out of Here."
Right.
Are we gonna gloss over the debut of Eric Carr on vocals on a Kiss record?
I intentionally held that one to the side because I didn't really consider that a remix.
You know what? Okay. Whose idea was that, and why?
Yeah, nope. We don't really I haven't found anything on it. Like, nope. There's nothing in the Wikipedias or like
from according to the established narrative, Eric didn't want to do it.
Okay,
I believe that. I don't see why they would do it. It would seem like, I guess they didn't want to overlook, if they're doing a quote unquote greatest hits, there's only a handful of songs that were hits.
Yeah.
And 2 of them were Peter Criss songs, Hard Luck Woman and Beth. I guess they didn't want to overlook that, and I guess they didn't want to give Peter any kind of...
No performance rights or anything.
Well, this is purely speculation, and to kind of work off what Cap just said about performance rights, I kind of feel that some of the older songs like Strutter and Deuce are missing a guitar. If that guitar that's missing is Ace... that may lend into trying to remove them from getting so many publishing and royalty rights.
Maybe.
Again, completely conjecture. Complete conjecture.
Who knows? There's probably people that would know that. I can't say that.
But the thing on Beth that's also interesting is, and they also did this with Love Gun. I forgot to mention this. Love Gun is sped up a little bit. Because since they were doing a little bit of the drum machine reworks and remastering, they actually ticked it up a little bit so it would be an exact BPM, because it wasn't an exact BPM before.
Isn't that what they call quantifying?
Yeah, so they quantize it.
Quantize, whatever. Okay, quantize. Yeah.
But Beth also doesn't sync up. Like if you sync up the very beginning, like note beat for beat, Beth, by the end of it, I think the Eric Carr one lasts like 2 seconds longer. Like it falls out of sync somewhere.
Yeah, poor Eric, man.
So yeah, let's kind of discuss on that. So we've already kind of said that Eric was already feeling a little bit disenchanted with the whole Kiss thing. Like he and Paul aren't getting along too well. He still feels like second fiddle. He's a hired gun.
They say that at some point during the Crazy Nights tour, him and Paul stopped speaking entirely, and Paul sort of kind of glosses it over. I mean, he mentions it in his memoirs, but I don't understand. There's got to be some reason, and I feel like that if Paul's glossing it over, it may well be something that Paul did, that he's aware that he did it, but he's not going to cop to it. Because
and I think what also leads to that, and we can circle back around to this, it just connects to it. There's that story that both Paul and Gene have said, which was when Paul went out on his solo tour, Gene and Eric came out to a show. And Eric went to the back and immediately pointed to Eric Singer, who was part of Paul's band. I know I'm jumping ahead, but this to me connects to it.
Okay, well, let's talk about this for a minute. Paul, to get to the point, in early 1989, instead of doing any kind of support, Kiss doing any support for Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits, they seem to kind of be very fractured here, off doing other things. Paul embarks on a solo club tour, and it's nearly 30 dates spread across, I think it was March. Was it February and March, or March and April? I can't remember, but it's late winter.
Right.
Most of them are in the Northeast, with a handful of California dates.
Yeah.
The band includes Bob Kulick, Dennis St. James on bass, and Eric Singer is the drummer.
Yep.
Who, of course, we know is going to be the future Kiss drummer.
And someone else called it, because, he showed up to one of those shows and pointed right at Eric and said, "You're going to replace me in Kiss."
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I mean, both. That's like what Gene and Paul have both said. They were like, "You're going to replace me one day in Kiss."
Well,
and
before
Paul
we get to that, which I don't want to do in this episode, let's just talk about the idea that Paul's even doing a solo tour, because this seems like a power play of some sort.
Oh, absolutely, because he's seen Kiss for the last few years as the Paul Stanley band, and he's tired of carrying to quote or to paraphrase him, he's tired of pulling the weight and Gene reaping the benefits.
And it seems like to me, though, he's trying to establish his autonomy outside of the band at this point. That statement, there's a lot to unpack right there. Because if he obviously he feels like he's moving in that direction, if Kiss isn't springboarding off of this greatest hits package to tour, Paul definitely is. Yeah. And like you just said earlier, Paul is selling himself as the front man. He's selling this as the concept of him.
Yep.
I think that there was a very conscious idea, and we've talked about this, all through the 80s, that they're trying to look for like escape routes.
Yeah.
Kiss isn't supposed to exist at this point, and the only reason why they do is because of what we talked about with all these lawsuits, the loss of the loss of income, the tax shelter evaporating. They're having to scramble for cash. They're looking for ways out.
Yeah, you have to with
acting
all of
gigs,
that going on,
producing gigs, management gigs, solo gigs, and Paul's out doing a club tour. Trying to establish himself as a solo act. I mean, it kind of doesn't make sense.
I mean, the way he was phrasing it is he was doing it like just to get out and stretch his wings.
Bullshit. Everything is a calculated move with these guys. Everything.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind that the whole idea here is just to establish his own autonomy away from Kiss should it all go belly up.
Yeah.
They're essentially rudderless right now. They have no manager outside of Jesse Hilson, Dr. Jesse Hilson.
Yeah, but he signed a non-compete, and he would no longer be Paul's therapist.
Well, great, wonderful. He's still, very closely aligned with Paul, and probably involved in his day-to-day decision making.
But what I was trying to my point being with the whole Eric Carr thing is so. He's already not getting along with Paul. Yeah. He runs into that scenario, and then they're also going, and by the way, you need to sing Beth. And he's already been like, I don't feel like doing it. And Peter even said he called me and asked for blessing, and I was like, yeah, you can do it. I don't know why they're wanting to, but you can do it.
He didn't like it, which I don't blame him. I wouldn't like it either.
So it's like when people discuss, Eric Carr was probably on his way out anyway. You know what? He may have. Because it really feels like they're really treating the guy wrong.
Well, they all might have. That's my point. It's like the band's very fractured and splintered right now. And they're really not, again, they're not a band. They're a duo.
Yeah.
It's Gene and Paul with two hired guys. Mm-hmm. It's still a duo. It has been a duo ever since then. It is a duo today. I don't care if you give the other guys the identity of the original guys. It's irrelevant to the issue. They're still hired guys.
And I think it's also
if
saying
either one of those guys dropped out, they would find someone else to slap that makeup on and keep going.
And I think it's also telling if Bruce is doing producing work.
Yeah, well, Bruce is. That's that. I don't think he ever saw Kiss extending beyond a few years anyway.
Yeah, he was always a working guy.
He was a working guy
Kiss
anyway.
too.
I don't think he saw that as a band situation. I think he always had a realistic idea to his approach to it. So
he's talked about it in hindsight, and it's so unfortunate. He goes, he didn't feel like he was an actual member of the band until Revenge. And I was like, oh, poor guy. Right at the end.
Well, and here's the irony of where we're going to leave this at is Paul's seeking to establish himself as a solo performer on some level.
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of off doing their own thing. Eric is paranoid as fuck that he's losing his gig. Mm-hmm. I don't think he is. I think it's just coincidence that it worked out exactly like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was by design. Certainly not at this point.
No.
And ironically, the only thing that keeps Kiss relevant in any way, shape, or form is what? All their makeup era stuff. It keeps hearkening back to that. The Exposed video, the Smashes, Thrashes, and Hits being primarily that era. This is so. It's like there's a great disconnect between 70s Kiss and 80s Kiss. Beyond me just making the joke about the logo, or the name, whatever, lowercase. Mm-hmm. It's just this thing is pretty much they're flogging the dead horse.
Yeah.
And
even though they poke at it with a music video coming up, it's also a set list where they pull out a couple more oldies.
Some big changes are going to have to be made. The big changes are coming. And we will talk about that on the next episode of No Time to Turn. So hopefully all of you guys will join us, and we will see you then.
Usually it's next time, but we'll say then.
We'll see you next time on No Time to Turn.
Thank you for listening. Please insert another coin by supporting the show for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/somethinggoodnetwork.